Are you afraid of transitions, resistant to change? Why? They are the source of your greatest growth. If you don't believe us, then let's talk to Chip Conley, who is on a midlife mission, actually, and he is the founder and CEO of MEA and the New York Times bestselling author with a new book that just came out called Learning to Love Midlife. Chip Conley, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss transitions.
Andre, it's great to be with you. A totally different context than the last time I saw you.
Yeah, we were at your facility in El Pescadero, South Baja, Mexico, at your facility called the Modern Elder Academy
Yes.
for a nice entrepreneurial retreat. Can you just take a couple minutes and explain MEA to the
Yep.
listeners? Because it's a fantastic location.
Thank you. Yeah. So long story short is I was a boutique hotelier for a very long time, 24 years, one of the first in North America. And then I sold my company, became a Hyatt brand, and was sort of like lost and ended up for 2 years trying to figure out what's next for me in my early 50s. And I ended up helping the three founders of Airbnb as their modern elder. They called me the modern
Okay,
elder.
got it.
They said, Chip, you are as curious as you are wise. That's what a modern elder is. And so I spent 7.5 years helping them take up the company up to the IPO, 4 years full-time, 3.5 years part-time. While I was in my part-time role there, I went down to Baja to write a book called Wisdom at Work, The Making of a Modern Elder. And while I was down there, I had a Baja Aha, an epiphany when I was running on the beach, which was like, hey, why don't we have a place for people in midlife to reimagine and repurpose themselves? And that's how MEA came about. And it's the first campus. We have two campuses, one in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and one in Baja. And Andre, the reason the first campus is in that location in Baja that's so beautiful was because I had a home right there. So there was no marketing plan. There's no like strategic study that said this is where we need to put the campus.
There's
No,
commute.
I just built around my home. So
Yeah, and it's a fantastic facility. We spent some time there last November, and you gave a presentation about the anatomy of transition that really hit me, and it was very powerful. And you gifted us the Anatomy of Transition book, published by Modern Elder Academy, which I believe is a workbook
yeah,
for
it's
your.
you can actually find it on the MEA website, which is meawisdom.com. Just go to the bottom header and look at
Okay.
the free resources, and you'll see the anatomy of a transition. It's an ebook.
Okay, I'll put that in the show notes for our listeners to get it because I read it. It's very powerful. And this is what I want to discuss with today. And I really like your statement about transitions that really hit me in that presentation is, your quote was midlife does not have to be a crisis. Think of it as a chrysalis.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So, midlife has the worst brand of any life stage. Let's just be
Yes.
honest. The one word attached to it is crisis, and we laugh about it. But the reality is it's a serious thing. And people go through some challenging times, often in their 40s and 50s. What's going on is there's a lot of reasons why that happens. Disappointment with, what you've accomplished and feeling like you're on a treadmill that it doesn't work for you, or having way too many things happening on in your life. There's a lot of reasons why people struggle, especially in their late 40s. Um, but what I started to realize is like, gosh, having had 4,000 people come to MEA, and to see that they maybe think they're in the midlife crisis, a dark, gooey time, but
Right.
it's really more like a chrysalis. And so that caterpillar to butterfly journey in the middle is the chrysalis. And it's actually where the transformation happens. So yeah, it might be a difficult transition, but it leads to something better. And that kind of psychological shift where you are less focused on the despair or the fear of what you're letting go, and you're more focused on what's ahead of you is
Mhm.
really important, particularly in midlife.
The biggest part of this, when you opened up that presentation, you just said transition starts with the end.
Isn't that weird?
Am I like it's one of those like, oh, you're so right, but that doesn't make sense. Well, what do you mean by that? So, and then you drew us an image, which is
Yeah.
a bunch of swirly lines in a big mess, like a big wool
Yes.
ball. And then you've got a single line coming out in a wave. So
Yeah.
do you want to start there at the end? What do you mean by you start at the end with a transition?
Yeah. When you're looking at any transition, there's a something's being left behind. Um, I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell's work, The Hero's Journey, which sort of says like you're in the default stage and everything's sort of normal. And then you leave that behind to go with the call to adventure of, going out and getting into what we call the messy middle. So the key is if you know that whether it's having a divorce or it's changing jobs or it's changing where you live, first step to actually that new place of where you're going to live is the ending of where you're currently living. And a lot of us actually forget about that. And we just get focused on that future thing. And we don't ritualize the process of saying, hey, this is an ending. And it's time for me to say goodbye to the people I know there or whatever it is. Bottom line is one of the coping mechanisms for that first stage of these 3 stages of a transition is to ritualize something, to say like, okay, you know what? That period of my life is over. And now I'm moving into this new period. Because if you don't ritualize it, if you don't sort of recognize that's the end, you could actually just keep going back. It's sort of like the caterpillar who goes into the chrysalis and then keeps trying to go back to being a caterpillar. It doesn't work very well. So you actually have to sort of say like, I'm done with that period.
Yeah, and I think something I think the listeners need to kind of like the subtlety of those statements is most people think of a transition as the end. Yeah. It's, and like you said, it's ending of something, but it's like the end of the world to them. But what you're saying is we need that end to convert that into a positive, or it's a transition into a different part of life. And I don't think we were not raised that way to think that way. Everything's supposed to be steady and calm and cool, right?
Yeah, there's a word called liminal. And when you're in liminal, you're in transition. And to be honest with you, life is liminal. We're liminal creatures. And yet what happens for a lot of people is they feel like when they're in transition, something went wrong. But
That's
during
right.
our whole life, we're going to go through it. Excuse me, I'm getting a little bit of water. So to be liminal is to be in transition. And adolescence, when you're going through adolescence, you're going through all kinds of transitions for the first time. And so you end up with this state of thinking like, okay, I'm in transition. And that's normal because when you're a kid, you're used to that. But there's a life stage called midolescence. And midolescence is when you're in midlife and you're going through hormonal and emotional and physical and identity transitions. But somehow we feel like when we're going through transitions in midlife, something's wrong with us. So the second stage of the transition, the anatomy of a transition, is to be able to say, okay, I'm in the messy middle now. I am in the middle of a metamorphosis. And the coping mechanisms during this time are learning to actually have some social support, because often when we go into that messy middle period, we feel a little bit lost or maybe incompetent. We feel like somehow like we are it's like an earthquake happening constantly. And so social support can help you sort of objectify like, okay, Chip, your life is not falling apart. You're just going through a transition right now. And then the other thing that is really valuable during that coping mechanism, during that messy middle, is to learn how to find the through line or the theme of what you're supposed to learn here. So if you remember those boys who got caught in the Thai boys who got caught in a cave, the soccer players, and they got caught because all of a sudden it started raining and it just was like a torrential monsoon rain, and they got stuck way back in a cave. And the only way the rescuers were able to get them out was to take a rope and have scuba divers go through the like maze of all the area to get to the boys, and then have the boys and the rescuers take them back using the rope. So think of that rope as the through line. When you're going through a messy middle time, or you're going through a time that feels confusing, you need to find what am I supposed to learn here? What's the theme here that's going to help me serve me in the future? And so that's the second stage. So the first stage is the ending of something. The second stage is the messy middle, where a lot of transformation is happening.
Before we go too far here, you said you used the term incompetence as part of the messy middle. And I just want to make sure the listeners don't understand. We're not saying incompetent. It's actually two separate words. Incompetence. Can you give us a little more explanation on that? Because I thought it's very powerful.
It's finding little steps that help you feel competent, because
Yeah.
when you feel incompetent, you get into a mental spiral downward, and that is not good for you. You know, it's like performance anxiety.
Yep.
And so what you really need to do is find small victories. Where can I be a little bit of competence? Where can I actually be competent a little bit? And then you build upon that, because you know, when you're in the messy middle, building confidence is a really important part of it.
Makes a lot of sense. So now the last part, the third part is new beginning.
Third bird is new beginning, and you know, when you people are going through transition, it's like, oh well, that's the only part of it. Like I go straight to new beginning. It's like, no, you
No,
end
right.
something, you messy middle. And here's the challenge with new beginning for some people is they expect to be really good at it immediately. And so a growth mindset is really essential in the new beginning. So the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset is when you've got a fixed mindset, you tend to you want to prove yourself, you want to win. When you have a growth mindset, you're focused less on winning and more on learning. And it's not about proving yourself, it's about improving yourself. And
Oh, oh, did anyone hear that? It's not about,
there you go, mic drop.
yes, repeat that again.
So when you're in a fixed mindset, you want to prove yourself, and
Yeah.
you prove yourself by winning.
Mhm.
When you're in a growth mindset, you improve yourself, and you define success not as winning but as learning. So
Mhm.
as a beginner, that you know that butterfly that comes out of the chrysalis, when it comes out, it does not immediately fly. Usually, it has wet wings. It ends up on the ground, and it has to flap its wings and
Yeah.
get used to being a beginner. So what we need to do is remind ourselves that becoming a beginner at something means we're not going to be very good at it, which means we need to be less self-critical and more focused on how we're improving.
Yeah.
And if we do that, and we give it the proper attention and don't shut ourselves down because we feel like we're an idiot, we will get better at that.
So that's and then yeah, becoming once you get out of the chrysalis, flapping your wings to start taking flight, and then once you're learning with the new wings and the new environment, you're
Mhm.
finding flow at
You
the
do find the
beginnings,
flow.
and then you're growing from there.
That's correct. And you know, if you don't find the flow after a while, then you probably stop and you just you're a butterfly that just sort of ends up dying on the ground. And that's okay. I mean, there are different parts of your life where you're going to
Yeah.
become a butterfly, and some parts you're going to be flying and like, oh my God, I'm pollinating around. But in other cases, you're not. And you know, when it comes to me and surfing, I had to go through a process to realize, you know what, not a great surfer. And as long as I have a sense of humor about it, I'm okay at 63 years old, because quite frankly, if as a 63-year-old, surfing is that's an accomplishment just getting out there.
Yeah, I tried that when I was at your facility. It's not that easy. The one quote I did get from the ebook, which I was think fantastic, is can I both change and stay the same? Is that a
Yeah.
big challenge in the ending at the beginning stage of the transition with the end?
You know, the thing that's interesting about the butterfly and the caterpillar is the caterpillar had imaginal discs inside of itself. It had the DNA of the butterfly. And so the process, if you look at visually the
Mhm.
caterpillar to butterfly journey, you know, the caterpillar, the chrysalis, and the butterfly look very different than each other. But within the butterfly was the DNA of, you know, I'm sorry, within the caterpillar was the DNA of the butterfly. So in changing, some things are still part of us. We are
Yes.
transitioning. We are being we're starting a new career. We have a new relationship in our life. We have a new found spirituality. We have a new perspective on politics. All these things could be new, but there's some core that's still there. And so I don't love the term reinvention. People use it all the time. And the reason I have a hard time with it is because it's like we evolve as humans more than we reinvent, because reinvention can be scary. It means like, oh my God, I'm no longer the person I
Yeah.
used to be. And in some cases that may sound good. Like, I don't want to be that person anymore. That's fine. But it's not like you all of a sudden lose the DNA that you've always had.
Right. We still have the
Um,
core essence of
that's
us
of
in there.
course.
So it's more of a
Yeah.
transformation
It is
rather
more of a
than reinvention.
transformation than a reinvention. Yep. Yep.
Oh, the other thing too that the book really highlights, and I really like the fact is, we're rarely transitioning for one reason.
Yeah.
or rarely going through one transition.
That's right. There's something called a life quake and Bruce Feiler is one of our faculty members who coined that term. And when you're going through a life quake, you're going through multiple transitions at the same time. And it happens a lot. And so it helps to know this anatomy of a transition, because in one part of your life, in your marriage or your relationship, you may be at one stage, you may be at the messy middle.
Yeah.
In your career, you might be at the ending. In your process of being a new athlete running marathons, you may be at the beginning stage. So the process of looking at each of the transitions you're going through and understanding what's the coping mechanism, and you can find all that on the anatomy of a transition on the MEA website, is helpful because it allows you to understand what's needed at this particular moment.
A lot of the common thread too, no pun intended with your image here. Like you said, in the messy middle, we need to start relying on people as for support on the support side. Yet at the same time, when we're starting to take flight in the new beginning, you want to find, is this where you find people, mentors, and unusual teachers? Is that because of the mindset shift, or now you're looking at things differently?
Yeah, well, you don't have to do this alone. So what's one of the beauties of going from messy middle to the new beginning is you can have guides who can help you get better at flying, who can help you become a beginner and be patient with you and help you have patience with yourself. So, that social support's valuable throughout all three stages, but I think it's particularly valuable in the messy middle, moving to the beginning stage, because it helps you have some training wheels that, feel like you're not going to, fall over riding your bicycle.
Well, I think that's the other thing too. It kind of is counterintuitive to the way we were raised. I'm speaking for me, maybe not necessarily you, but we're supposed to do everything ourselves, especially as entrepreneurs.
Rugged individualist,
Yeah.
rugged individualist, exactly.
And what you're telling us is no, we need to rely on people's support. And that's one thing I really want to get the listeners to understand is there's no way we can do it all ourselves. The emotional toll, it's got to be discussed or supported, especially if you're surrounded with people of like minds or have experienced the similarities of that transition.
Yeah. We talk about going through something. I
Right.
like to say we're growing through something. And when we're growing through something, we are in the process of saying this experience, and it may be a painful experience, is going to help me be better in the future, because our painful life lessons are the raw material for our future wisdom. Let me say that again. Our painful life lessons, what we're going through right now, are the raw material for our future wisdom, for us being wiser and more adept at living life and making decisions and being a leader. And so if you can see that, then you realize, like, okay, these mistakes I've just learned from are going to help me in the future.
Yeah, you said something similar at the beginning, just like a good friend of mine. And we always look at these events, painful events or obstacles, as how does this serve me?
Yeah.
And that's so is this happening for a reason? What can I learn from it and grow from it so I can move on? And that's if we start looking at obstacles that way with the growth mindset, is how does it serve me to serve others? Is a different way of looking at it than saying, oh my God, this has gotten in the way, and start using it as excuses.
Agreed.
Wow. Oh my Lord. I can't believe I really love this concept, the anatomy of the transition, the three parts, the end, the messy middle, and new beginnings. And the fact that, I'm going to paraphrase this a bit, but basically the book is saying, and yourself is ending that the end of the transition, the start of the transition is ending of your current comfort.
Yeah.
Right. And that's probably what we're resisting the most, is that change of comfort. Even if it was a negative environment, even if it was a negative or not very fun thing, but it was comfortable. And transitions are not to be done alone. I think is a great recommendation on that. And okay, usually I do three, but I got to do four because there's two mic drops here. Like not going through something, we are growing through it. I think it's a great subtle change in mindset, and the growth mindset people will get it. And the growth mindset people, you improve yourself, you never prove yourself.
No,
That's the growth mindset.
that's right. Moving from proving to improving, because
Yeah.
the reality is we spend a lot of our lives trying to prove ourselves. It's just how how we're built, how our families sort of built us.
Mhm.
But one of the processes of midlife is to move from proving to improving.
Awesome. Where can we find you, Chip? Where
Yep.
can
Learning to Love Midlife, my book, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. You can find that wherever you are buying books. You can find it also on my chipconley.com website. And to learn more about MEA, the Modern Elder Academy, you can go to the meawisdom.com website. And I have a daily blog called Wisdom Well that
Yeah.
actually, it just is, if you like what you heard today, just know that I write, all the time. And there's a daily blog. If you subscribe to it, it's free and you get an email from me every morning. And I post those on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, those blogs are really great.
Thank
Very,
you, Andre.
very raw,
Yep.
personal, and there's no bullshit. Like it's just,
Yeah.
it's very honest and true. So I commend you on
Thank
providing
you.
that side of yourself for others to understand that you're not alone.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for you, the listener, are you in the messy middle right now, or are you at the beginning, at the end of the transition process? So think about that a little more and let me know what you think. I'd like to hear from you at Andre@tacticalbts.com. And Chip, I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Andre.
And to you, the listener, thank you for learning with me. Talk to you soon.